Hey everybody, today we're going to learn about asexual reproduction and cancer. In order for you to be prepared to take notes, you'll need a piece of paper and something to write with. So make sure that at the top of your page you label asexual reproduction and cancer. And let's get started. So the first question we need to answer is what controls cell division? There are three different things that can control cell division of our cells. Activation of genes, so that means sections of your DNA that are turned on to produce proteins that facilitate the division of the cells. Also contact with other cells. So if one cell is right up next to another cell and notices that certain proteins are being produced to facilitate their division, that may also influence the division of the other cell. And lastly, the size of the cell and how much volume it accrues and how fast it accrues that volume based upon the availability of nutrients and how fast it's able to absorb that material. So what causes cancer? Cancer is defined as a disease of uncontrollable cell division. When we look at a life cycle of a normal functioning cell, a somatic cell, a skin cell, a cheek cell, those cells will spend about 90% of their time in interphase. Now, when that cell no longer is able to spend 90% of its time in interphase, but instead spends 90% of its time dividing, then we have a problem. We get more cells growing and accruing, which will eventually form a tumor, like you can see on the page right there. And then those cells also have possibly a secondary effect due to the mutation causing that division, that they don't die at normal rates. Usually our cells are getting ready to divide in order to replace a damaged or a lost cell. Well, when you have cancer or a cancerous cell, then those cells are going to divide at a much quicker rate. They're not going to die fast enough, and usually there's some sort of lump of cells or a tumor formed in the process. So how can a normal cell become a cancerous cell? Well, a lot of this has to do with the proteins and the enzymes that facilitate cell division. If you do not make a particular enzyme at the appropriate time that can assist with cell division, then a cell can become cancerous. If you make too much of a protein, like an enzyme that facilitates cell division, then you can cause cancer. And also, if you have enzymes that are working at the wrong place in the wrong time, which maybe it's a protein that would help facilitate the production of centrioles and move along the cell division, but that is made earlier on in interphase, in the G1 phase instead of the G2 phase, then you're going to jump the gun and get your cell to begin dividing before it should be. So how do we get faulty cells to produce faulty genes and faulty enzymes? It comes down to your DNA, because if we remember, the function of DNA is to control cellular activities. It's to hold the instructions for making proteins. Well, when our DNA is changed, then the instructions change for our cell, and the proteins that are made from those instructions are also altered. There are two ways that your DNA can become changed or mutated. The first are through environmental factors. If you eat particular foods, if you expose yourself to certain chemicals, if you're getting too much sunlight and X-rays and other forms of radiation, then your DNA can spontaneously mutate. And if that mutation occurs at the right place in your DNA, it can lead to uncontrollable cell division. Now, if it's not an environmental factor that encourages or it changes your cells from normal to cancerous, then it could also be a genetic factor, that there may be some mutation that was inherited through a faulty gene from either parents. For example, breast cancer has been correlated to genetic factors, particularly two proteins, the BRCA1 and the BRCA2 gene, have been associated with breast cancer. If you inherit either one of those, there is an increased risk of you developing later on in life breast cancer, but it doesn't guarantee you develop breast cancer, but there is that association. So we can have a mutated cell, we can inherit faulty genes, and that leads to uncontrollable cell division, cancer. Now, taking a sidestep, let's talk a little bit about two different forms of asexual reproduction. We know that asexual reproduction is the production of a new life, a new organism, but from one source of genetic material. So to boil that down, that means that there is one parent, there are two identical offspring produced. They will be the exact same as the parent. But these are going to be modified forms of mitosis, not considered mitosis because there's no nucleus involved. The first we touched on when we learned about mitosis, that's called binary fission. Remember, binary fission occurs in only prokaryotic cells, your bacteria, like you can see in the picture on the left. It occurs every 20 minutes because what's going on in binary fission is that every 20 minutes the DNA is replicated and then the cell divides exactly in half. And it's a little bit difficult to see what's going on with the DNA in the left picture, so you can see on the right that the cell gets a little bit bigger, it's copied its DNA, which is why it's more dense here in the middle, and then it splits into two cells. And because there's nothing else to copy besides the DNA, it happens at a really quick rate. The last and final type of asexual reproduction is called budding. Budding is when a new organism forms from an outgrowth or a bud. This picture here on this slide is a picture of a hydra. It's a protist. It's called a hydra because it's supposed to look like the mythological hydra with all the little heads popping up. But you'll see in the middle of that picture that there's a little nub or a bud forming there. That bud is a smaller miniature version of the adult organism. It is identical to it genetically, and it will remain attached to that parent until it's matured enough, like you can see in the third form here, right? It looks a lot more like an adult hydra. It might be a smaller version of it, but it'll stay attached until it's grown mature enough to be separated from the parent. And once separated, that organism will continue to grow in size until it is again the full size of the parent or its parent, and then it will also undergo budding and will have its own bud form from it, producing another identical copy. So that wraps up cancer and asexual reproduction notes. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.